Welcome to this explainer. Today we are taking a massive, honestly kind of intimidating data set, the projected gross domestic products of 218 different countries, and we're going to distill it all down into a clear, fascinating narrative about global economic power. We're looking ahead to the year 2026 to figure out exactly where the world's wealth is concentrating, who is rising the fastest, and what it all actually means for our global future. Because ultimately, these shifts dictate everything from global supply chains and inflation to the future job market you'll be navigating. Okay, let's dive into this. To make sense of all these numbers without getting completely lost, we're going on a macro to micro journey today. We'll quickly cover defining nominal GDP, then look at the global heavyweights, check out the global economic pie, explore the fastest growing economies, and finally, bring it down to earth with a per capita reality.
So, kicking things off with Section 1, defining nominal GDP, which is absolutely our core metric.
Before we start throwing literally trillions of dollars around, we need to quickly set our baseline. Nominal gross domestic product is simply the total monetary value of all goods and services produced and sold within a country over the course of 1 year. But here's the kicker. I really want to emphasize the second half of that definition. This is without adjustments for inflation. That's a crucial detail. We're looking at the raw, current price size of the economic pie. We aren't adjusting for cost of living differences between countries. We're just measuring the sheer unadjusted volume of economic output.
And as for our timeline, we are peering just slightly into the future. The numbers we're looking at today are projections for the year 2026, sourced directly from the International Monetary Fund. It's kind of like a crystal ball, giving us an incredibly valuable vantage point to spot exactly where global wealth is heading over the next couple of years.
Moving right along to Section 2, the global heavyweights. Prepare for some massive scale here.
The current reality of economic dominance is frankly staggering, and this brilliantly illustrates just how deep that concentration goes. The United States just towers over the rest of the world with a projected 2026 GDP of $32.38 trillion. I mean, trillion. Right behind is China, holding incredibly strong at $20.85 trillion. But then, well, look at the drop-off. It is absolutely monumental. In third place, Germany sits at $5.45 trillion. That multi-trillion-dollar gap between the top two titans and the third-place runner-up shows us that the US and China are practically operating in an economic universe entirely of their own.
But just below Germany, we've got this fascinating, tightly packed group that we can call the 4 trillion club. You have Japan projecting at $4.38 trillion, the United Kingdom right on its heels at $4.26 trillion, and India intensely close behind that at $4.15 trillion. So while the top two spots are separated by literally tens of trillions of dollars, the race for 4th, 5th, and 6th place is incredibly tight, with less than $250 billion separating the whole pack.
Which brings us to Section 3. The global economic pie. Let's talk about wealth distribution.
When you zoom out and look at the entire world's wealth all at once, a profound concentration of power emerges. Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer proportion at the very top. Out of 218 countries and territories being tracked, the United States alone accounts for 26.23% of the entire world's GDP. Add in China's 16.85%, and you reach a pretty striking conclusion. Nearly half of all global economic output, over 43% of the entire pie, is controlled by just 2 single nations. That leaves the rest of the world, over 200 countries combined, sharing the remaining 56.92%.
Let's pivot to Section 4, fastest growing economies. This is all about the speed of change.
Because, total scale is really just a snapshot in time. Speed, however, speed tells us the future. While those massive developed giants we just talked about hover around a modest 1 to 2% growth, emerging markets are absolutely surging. You have Ethiopia growing at 9.20%, Guinea at 8.68%, Uganda at 7.51%, and Bhutan at 7.48%. This demonstrates for sure that the fastest, most dynamic economic expansion on the planet isn't happening in North America or Western Europe. It is happening right here in these emerging markets.
But there is one nation that completely shatters the standard global growth curve: Guyana. With an absolutely wild projected 2026 growth rate of 16.17%. This double-digit explosion is a brilliant reminder that individual nations can hit massive transformative economic catalysts that completely detach them from the baseline global average. Talk about a breakout year.
And that leads us to our final stop, Section 5,
the per capita reality. Let's bring this down to a human scale metric. Because trillions of dollars can feel pretty abstract, right? To really understand the human scale impact of all this wealth, we use GDP per capita. That's simply a country's total economic output divided by its total population. Think of it as the ultimate reality check. It strips away the raw size of a nation and measures the profound difference between a country's geopolitical weight on the world stage and its citizens' actual average economic reality on the ground.
Let's move to and see how this builds a completely different understanding of wealth. On one side, we have India, an undisputed economic titan with a massive total GDP of $4.15 trillion. But because that wealth is distributed across an immense population, the per capita GDP is just $2,813. Now contrast that with Monaco. Monaco's total economy is a tiny fraction of India's, at just $10 billion. However, spread across a tiny enclave of residents, the per capita wealth is an astronomical $256,581. It's a completely different world.
So the absolutely crucial point here is that this per capita reality completely upends our traditional ranking boards, even at the very top. Look at this comparison. The United States is the wealthiest large nation by far, boasting an immense total GDP of $32.38 trillion and a very strong per capita figure of $94,430. Not bad at all. But compare that to Luxembourg. Luxembourg's total GDP is a relatively small $110.42 billion, yet on a per-person basis, it rockets past the U.S. to $158,733. It perfectly illustrates that even the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world gets beaten on an individual level by these small, hyper-wealthy nations.
All right, as we wrap things up, let's quickly lock in our key takeaways from this dataset. First, the macro view shows us that the overall scale of global wealth is heavily dominated by just two nations, the United States and China. Second, if you are looking for economic velocity and the fastest growth, you have to look away from the superpowers and towards surging emerging markets. And third, national GDP absolutely does not equal individual wealth. We have to look at both the macro totals and the micro per capita numbers to get an honest, complete picture of the global economy.
Which leaves us with this final, kind of provocative question to think about. As we look ahead, what do these 2026 projections actually mean for the balance of global power over the next decade? Think about it. When so much wealth is concentrated in so few places, yet growth is surging in completely different regions, the geopolitical landscape is practically guaranteed to shift. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the data.